Thank you for being here. Some of us have been on these calls together for months, and some of you are new here. So we are really excited to be talking to you and with you today. I hope that you full on participate in ways that make sense for you today, whether that's in the chat box or asking a question during the question and answer period at the end of the call. Or throughout the call. We like to have a conversational vibe here on these calls, and we know that people are joining from around the state and have different concerns and issues, and so we are prepared and ready to interact on that level with you. Today, of course, is a really important and exciting day, National Voter Registration Day. We are just weeks away from the general election on November 3rd, and we really believe in voter access for everyone, including eligible voters with intellectual and developmental disabilities here in Arizona. That's what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, we are right in the middle of a campaign on social media that we have dubbed hashtag Disability Vote AZ. And one of our new staffers here at the Planning Council has been heading up those efforts. While he's a new staffer, he is a familiar face. That is Jason Sneed. So, Jason, I'm going to allow you to talk a little bit about what you've been doing to promote voter access in Arizona.
Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. As Sarah said, I'm a new staffer here. I'm the Research and Communication Specialist. Recently, I've been doing some videos about just voting and why I vote. Also, I'm also a self-advocate. Just to point that out, I have cerebral palsy and I use a wheelchair. And so why I vote is because it gives me a voice and just also, I don't know if any of y'all have kids or anything like that. It gives me opportunity to say something and to do something independently because I know my kids don't listen to me and my wife sometimes doesn't listen to me. But at least when I vote, you know, I can have a voice. Also, when I'm out in the community, sometimes you know people don't listen to me as well. Although it doesn't happen so much now, but when I go to the doctor and they talk to my caregiver or my wife's actually a nurse practitioner, so that you know they talk and then I tell them okay, speak English because I have to understand what they're saying. Um, and also when I go out to dinner or something, sometimes people ask me, you know, the waiter asks my wife or my caregiver what I want. So it's just good to have a voice. I've done a couple videos with about voter eligibility and also about just how to register online. And I want to do more, and I want to talk to you guys more. So my contact information is on the ADDPC website, and so please give me your stories. I'm also on the Facebook. It's on the Facebook story section. So go ahead and let me know what you're thinking, because that's what I want. Yeah. That's what I want to know. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you guys. And Sarah just posted my email in the chat, so go ahead and email me too. All right. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Jason. I know that it's been really cool to see your voting videos. You can find those on our Instagram stories at AZDDPC, Facebook. You've been really diligent about those, and I can't wait to see what else you'll post in the future about the hashtag Disability Vote AZ campaign. Now, if you all are paying attention at all, you've probably seen a lot of information out in the press, on social media, all about getting out the vote for everybody. One of the ways that here in Arizona we've tackled this is through videos, videos that were produced by the Arizona Center for Disability Law. They've been working hard all year to set up really easy to understand videos for everybody to watch who is in the disability field or who has a disability or cares for someone with a disability. And so we're going to watch one of those videos right now. You may see some familiar faces, and you may learn some new things. So I'm going to share my screen.
And just a heads up, when the video plays, you might need to adjust your volume. It might sound kind of loud. So I just wanted to give a warning if anyone does have that.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, we don't want to blow our ears out here. So here we go. This was produced by the Arizona Center for Disability Law and SABE, Self-Advocates Being Empowered, along with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. Give me 1 second here. All right, here we go.
Voting is a fundamental right. Through voting, we can make change. Why do people vote? There are many reasons.
Voting is important to me because it's the one time where every single one of us, from caregiver to billionaire, have the exact same voice in our system. It's the one time where we meet on the level.
It is important to me to vote because we all have a voice, and we need to let that voice be heard.
Because I have an intellectual developmental disability, I should be able to exercise the same rights as everybody else.
Voting is important to me because I get to take part of the community and meet government and county officials.
A lot of people say that they don't vote, and the reason is because they believe their vote doesn't count. I vote because I know it's the best and most effective way for my voice to be heard, for my opinions to matter. So I encourage everyone, your vote does count. If you don't vote, it won't.
Voting is the great equalizer. It allows everyone, no matter who they are, to have an equal say in an outcome of an election.
Voting is important to me because it gives me an opportunity to have a voice in what is happening within our country.
I think voting is important, especially for people with disabilities, because I think they need to tell Congress about what's important services that people need in their lives.
Voting is very important to me so I could get my opinion, my thoughts across to the candidate and anybody that is running for election. It is very important that I get my point across.
The reason why I vote is because I know that the voting is very important to vote and everything else, and it's more important to know know how to vote.
People have fought for years and years for the right to vote, especially someone with a disability. Because we're a minority, we need to make sure that we take advantage of our opportunity to make a difference and let our voice be heard.
Why voting is important to me is because I'm fulfilling my rights that I have under both the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Maine.
Hi, I'm Ann. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. It's my right and privilege to vote as a person with a disability. I'm proud to vote. I'm proud to help to teach others to vote and to get more people with disabilities to vote. I think that by voting, that people get to hear my voice, and by getting other people with disabilities to vote, they get the message for people with disabilities that we can vote and we should vote.
My name is Jason Billus, and the reason is that I do believe in voting because I am American. I am like everybody else, and also that I'm over 18, and I don't listen to anybody else but me, and I know whatever it says on what's going on in the news because I am an American just like everyone, and that's why I'm happy to vote.
Voting to me is a right because as a person with a disability, our voices need to be heard. Our voices need to be heard as a person with a disability and without. And in order for your voices to be heard, you have to be a person that believes in getting your voice heard. And that's what voting means to me, is getting my voice heard and helping other people get their voices heard.
All right, so you may have seen some people that you recognize in that video. It was really well done, so thank you, ACDL, for that. Um, we wanted to talk a little bit about some new data that the Planning Council partnered with collecting. We partnered with the Institute for Human Development at the Northern Arizona University's UCED. So we actually have invited Arden Day, who was the main researcher on that project. We invited her today to talk a little bit with her about what she found out. Now, this was a study done here in Arizona, and it hasn't really been it has been officially released, but this is kind of the first time where we'll dive in to the results, and I think you'll find them really interesting since they particularly deal with the IDD community here in Arizona. So Arden, thanks for joining us today. We can't hear you yet. We can see you okay, Arden. Maybe adjust your audio settings. It looks like she's trying something different so that we'll be able to talk with her. Arden, you can also try calling in on like a phone. Okay, she's gonna call in. So thank you for your patience, everybody. In the meantime, I know some people in the chat box have been asking for the link to this video. So we'll share that right now. Yeah, it's a good one to share, especially since we are just weeks away from the election and we want to get out the vote as much as possible. So I'll share that video link in the chat box. And feel free to share it far and wide. It's uploaded to YouTube and you'll be able to access it there. Okay, it looks like Arden is calling in.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. All right. I'm so sorry about that.
Hey, we've all been here.
So sorry.
We've all been there. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have spent a while collecting voter data in Arizona. So can you just briefly tell us what the goal of this study was?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm going to give people a heads up. I'm going to try to speak slower. I do tend to talk a little fast. I have been teased about it mercilessly by my nieces. So I will work on that. So the goal of the study was really to understand the barriers and facilitators, so what made it easier or harder for people to vote from the perspective of individuals with disabilities, service providers, and then family members of people with disabilities in the state of Arizona. So we conducted interviews and focus groups with those three groups of people so that we could really document that lived experience with voting and hopefully learn more about the barriers that people experienced from their perspective, and then what things could be done to resolve some of those barriers also from those perspectives. So it's kind of the goal.
Interesting. What were some of the standout results that you and your research team found as you collected all this data and did the interviews with everybody?
Yeah, so I think there were a few things that stood out to me. I also wanted to mention, in watching that video, it brought up a lot of things that I think that we heard as well on these interviews and focus groups. So we really heard about a lot of people talking about their right to vote and having sort of an obligation to vote because of that right, and that they really wanted to have their voice heard as sort of a way to express their opinion to a much larger crowd and group and to political officials. And sort of how important that was to them. I think that we had some other things that came up through interviews and focus groups that were a little bit surprising to me that I didn't expect. I think one of those things was really how important the social aspect of voting was for a lot of people. And this was, family members talked about this, people with disabilities talked about this. We sort of got it from a wide range of the people we talked to. And so they really talked about, those social networks, and whether that's like family or their service providers that they worked with a lot and see on a regular basis, or peers, and how highly important that was for influencing a person's desire or action around voting, as well as like who they wanted to vote for was really influenced by, friends and family members in that social network. And family, I think, was in particular really important for this group. For like family, really, it was really helpful for people to vote if they also had the support of their family members. And then I think that another thing that surprised me, I guess maybe it shouldn't have, but a lot of people did not, with disabilities, didn't really talk a lot about the direct influence of stigma preventing them from voting. I think we talked to a lot of really strong self-advocates, and they were sort of the opinion that they wanted to go to polling places to vote because they thought it was important for other people to see people with disabilities voting. And they didn't really talk about, that stigma was going to prevent them from voting, and that would really be an issue for them. However, we did notice that there were some mixed responses from both disability service providers and family members around people with developmental and intellectual disabilities voting. So some people were really supportive in helping their family members and consumers with disabilities vote. And they thought that voting was really important for this group, especially important for this group, because they tend to be a little underrepresented in voting. They tend to, people with disabilities don't vote as often. And so some of these groups were really supportive. We also had another subset of people that we talked to that questioned whether people with disabilities, with intellectual and developmental disabilities in particular, should vote. And we heard a lot of discussion around whether or not people felt like that group had the capacity to understand issues around voting. So we kind of had those two different mindsets that we heard while we were talking to this group, which was another sort of, I think, interesting thing that came out of this conversation. But it wasn't something that I think people with disabilities that we talked to really felt influenced their decision to vote.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between passively supporting and proactively supporting someone's ability to cast their vote that you found?
Yeah. So Sarah and I talked about this yesterday when we were chatting about this little bit of conversation here. And one of the things that I think was noticeable was I don't think that providers and family members really said that they would prevent someone with a disability from voting, and that they would be really active about preventing, their consumer or family member from voting. But it was more that they weren't going to be helpful in the process either, or in some instances where we were talking to a family member that had a family member of someone with a disability, they would sort of say that they weren't necessarily going to teach them about voting. And so it was a little bit more like passive, like, I'm not going to prevent that from happening, but I'm also not going to put this person in a situation where I have to teach them about voting or help them to register to vote or any of those things. So, which was, I sort of like looked at as this, passive, prevention of voting versus like an active, like, they're not going to say to someone, no, you can't register to vote, but it's more like they're just not going to help them either. So.
That's really interesting. I think that's a really key point that's important to share and talk about today. Is there any takeaways that stand out to you from your research that really are important for Arizona's voting officials to know, especially those who maybe haven't explored reaching the disability vote that much?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, this like social aspect that I've been talking about is a little bit more providers and family members, but I think for like voting officials in general, and sort of like looking at the larger picture of elections, I think voting by mail for this population is really like it's going to be important for everyone in this upcoming election because of COVID and the pandemic and everything that's still happening within our society today. But even before that, people talked about how important voting by mail was for them, that a lot of people preferred to vote by mail anyway because it just gives them a little bit more time with the ballot. They can go and look things up if something is confusing. They can talk to a family member or a friend and help them fill out the ballot. I think there was a lot of confusion for people about what the rules were when they went to the polling place. So we heard some people say that from a family member perspective, well, I'm not sure if I can help my family member with a disability read the ballot or help them fill it out so that they know where they're supposed to mark for a certain person. Not help them make the decision, obviously, but just help them understand the ballot and like what they're looking at and read the ballot if they need to. We heard some of that. We heard it from people with disabilities as well, that they weren't sure if they were allowed to ask an election official for help, how much help they were allowed to get, and sort of what that looked like, because not everyone who needs help with a ballot needs like a voting machine. Sometimes they just need someone to help them read the ballot. So voting by mail or being able to fill out the ballot at home was really important for this group. So I think that was one thing that I would focus on, is making sure that access to at-home voting is available to everyone, that it's easily accessible, all of those things. And then also, like, when people go to the polls, making sure that there's clear rules about, like, making sure that people can ask questions and all of the poll workers know what the rules are around having someone help you vote. And then I think the other piece was this plain language idea. I think that people were really confused, especially when people were talking about ballot measures. And this was for everyone, like across the board. People mentioned that ballot measures could be really confusing, or provisions could be really confusing, and not understanding what they were really voting for if they hadn't sort of done some research or looked it up ahead of time. And so I think even though I know that there are laws around plain language on ballots, I think that they can still be really confusing. And I think that was across the board. That was for family members. That was for people with disabilities. That was for providers. Everyone was like, this is still needs work. So I think that was the other thing that I took away from that for voting officials.
Definitely. People seem to have different definitions of plain language.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I know that would benefit everybody. Plain language, ballot explanations, ballot initiative explanations. Arden, that's is really interesting stuff. I'm going to put a link to your report, to your study in the chat box so people can dive into that. Thank you so much for sharing with us this morning. I think it's really timely, of course, on National Voter Registration Day. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And if anyone has questions, like other questions about some of the things that we did, I can put my email in the chat so that you can contact me if you have any additional questions. So I am around. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arden. All right, so now that we kind of have some context for what the situation is here in Arizona regarding voter access for people with IDD, let's dive into some of the how-tos and important details on, what this means during the middle of get out the vote efforts, right, here in election season. So we are going to hear from Ronaldo Fowler next from the Arizona Center for Disability Law. He is a strong advocate for voter access. And I do want to make one mention for today's agenda, for today's program. we did invite and have conversations with both of the state parties. We said that we would love to hear from representatives from both the Arizona Democratic Party and the Arizona Republican Party about their efforts to reach voters with disabilities. We did have conversations with officials from both, so they were responsive, but the time crunch was just a little too steep for them. They both expressed interest, but we struggled to pin down actual representatives from their organizations. And I just wanted to make that note because I think it just shows that more attention needs to be given to this community and our community when it comes to election time. So wanted to put that out there, but I'll hand things over to Ronaldo. Take it
Okay.
away.
Thank you very much, and happy National Voter Registration Day. So what I want to do today is look at the title, Promoting Voting Access for Arizonans with Intellectual Developmental Disabilities. This really project started about 4 years ago with a group of advocacy organizations that I would like to kind of talk about, because when we look at promoting, we're looking at the entire system that serve individuals with intellectual disabilities. And so we've taken a multi-strategy approach to addressing this particular issue. I want to talk about some partners. Southwest Families has been a big partner with us. Self Advocates Becoming Empowered, the Youth Actual Council of Arizona, People First of Arizona, the ARC of Arizona, the Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona, the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and Southwest Institute for Families and Children. They've been instrumental partners that we've had and worked with for the last 4 years. So if you go ahead and advance to the next slide. Okay, so before I get started, this presentation is going to be a question and answer presentation. So feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hands, and I'll try to answer those questions. And I want to get this out of the way. The purpose of this presentation and question and answers to provide general information regarding voting process, the voting process. The information provided in summary form and is not intended to be a substitute for legal advice. Federal and state law can change at any time, so please stay abreast to any possible changes to the law. That's our little disclaimer. Next, please. So for those who don't know about the Arizona Center for Disability Law, ACDL is a not-for-profit public interest law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of individuals with a wide range of physical, mental, psychiatric, sensory, and cognitive disabilities. ACDL is part of a nationwide protection and advocacy, the P&A system, which includes Protection and Voter Access Project, which we call the PAVA. Okay, next please. So under the Help America Vote Act, the PAVA program works to ensure that persons with disabilities should have an opportunity to cast a private and independent vote. Very important, a private and independent vote, and have full participation in the electoral process in registering the vote, casting a vote, and accessing polling places. So when you look at this terminology that we use the word electoral process. That's the entire process. When they send out voter education materials, we want to make sure that the information is an alternative format. We've also talked with our election officials about the language levels. We talked about plain language with our election officials to try to get some of that information done in a manner where a variety of the general population can understand what's being said in ballots and various educational materials. Next, please. So to ensure access to the electoral process for persons with IDD, intellectual developmental disabilities. So what we have focused on is working actually with persons with disabilities. We've provided extensive trainings at a variety of levels for persons with disabilities about their rights, the fundamental rights of voting, understanding this process. The curriculum that we use are designed for persons with intellectual disabilities. One of our key partners to do this is Self Advocates Becoming Empowered. They have the curriculum, we work together. We've done tons of statewide trainings over the last 4 years. We've also created voter education resources for persons with disabilities. As you saw earlier, we had a video. We have some more videos that are available for persons with disabilities. We're working with our partner at SAVE. They have videos that they're working on. So we're working on resources. We're working on documents geared for persons with disabilities. In addition to that, we've also focused on voter registration and get out the vote for persons with disabilities. We've partnered with self-advocacy organizations. I've listed some of those organizations before. Youth Action Council, Southwest, we've worked with them. We've also working with the court system regarding voting under limited guardianship. So in addition, we've collaborated with disability organizations and stakeholders. Next, please. One of the things that we've also done is focus on working with our election officials. We have spent for the last almost 4 years, we've had multiple disability roundtables with Maricopa County Recorder Office and the Election Department. Those roundtables probably some of the most well-attended of the 6 roundtables by the Recorder's Office. We've looked at policy. We talked about best practices with election officials. We've actually also talked about policy impacting voters with disabilities. When they design policies, we want to be there at the beginning and talk about those policies, how to meet the needs of voters with disabilities. We actually did a voting demonstration. We've done several voting demonstrations and provided feedback to the county on their accessible voting equipment and making sure that they meet the needs of voters with disabilities. We're working with provider agencies to ensure that individuals that live in group homes or different living arrangements, that the provider agency understands what their obligations are regarding individuals that live in the group home. We've worked with the State Division of Developmental Disabilities. We will continue to work with them in their role as the state agency that serves that community. Next slide, please. As you can see, we've done all of this work for the last 4 years leading up to the primary and the general election that's going to happen on November the 3rd. But one of the things that's really, really important for those who have not registered to vote, you have until October the 5th to get registered to vote if you're going to vote in the November the 3rd general election. It's very important, okay? Next slide, please. So additional education resources for voters. Arizona Citizens Clean Elections is a great resource for information. They actually have a page regarding voters with disabilities. The chief election officials for the state of Arizona is the Arizona Secretary of State. Tons and tons of information at the Secretary of State's website. And I want everyone to really understand this, is that there's been a lot of conversation at the national level at different levels. I want everyone to understand, in the state of Arizona, our counties run our elections, okay? Our counties run our election. We have 15 counties, and each county has a county recorder. If you have any questions about elections, voting in your county, you can go to your recorder's office, and you can go to your election department in your counties. As I said to you earlier, elections are ran at the county level and at the state level. Next slide, please. So the Secretary of State has put out some information regarding assistance, receiving assistance, okay? This comes from the Secretary of State about your applications. A lot of times there's confusion about how can I assist a person with a disability? When can I assist that person? Under what conditions can I assist that person? So here's the comments from the Secretary of State. I'm going to read this. If an individual is unable to sign or fully complete election materials such as voter registration forms, early ballot affidavits, they may be assisted by an individual who is willing to help at that person's direction. This also includes receiving assistance at the polling place by poll workers, 2 different political parties, or an individual the voter with a disability chooses. Okay, that's very important. So you can get assistance. Next slide, please. So one of the things that has happened since COVID-19 has impacted voter registration across the country and across the state of Arizona. Often voter registration in the past was done in person. Due to COVID-19, most of the activity has pretty much stopped. And so to address this particular issue, the Arizona Secretary of State has set aside unique URL links to do virtual voter registration. The Arizona Center for Disability Law has partnered with a number of disability organizations, and we have a statewide virtual voter registration drive going on. Since this is National Voter Registration Day, I just want to really say to you, and we have a link that I will show you at the towards the end of the PowerPoint presentation with the actual link to do the virtual voter registration. And really the purpose of this is to increase voter registration and voter turnout among Arizonans with disabilities. And this is an online voter registration opportunity that is safe for you. All you need is a Arizona driving license. If you don't have that, you can use your state issued non-driver license issued ID. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's some real basic information. To register to vote, you must be a U.S. citizen. If you're not a U.S. citizen, please do not register to vote because that will have an impact on your ability to become a U.S. citizen in the future. You must be an Arizona resident. You must be 18 years of age or older on or before the day of the next general election, okay? And really what's really important, you have to register 29 days prior to the election. That is an Arizona law. Other states allow different timelines. And so sometimes when people move to Arizona, they operate as if they came from their state and they sometimes miss the registration date. So real important, 29 days prior to the election. Next slide, please. Okay, so voting under limited guardianship. Voting under limited guardianship is available in Arizona. For further information, you can go to our website and get additional information about voting under limited guardianship. That's an option. We also provide information about if you are under guardianship, how you can revisit that in terms of trying to get the ability to vote. Okay, next slide. Now, you cannot register to vote if you have been convicted of a felony and have not had your rights restored, or you have been adjudicated incapacitated by a court of law. Those are the two conditions that you cannot register to vote in the state of Arizona. Next slide, please. So, how to register to vote? Up on the screen, this is a link to the Secretary of State's website, and you can go to this link, print out the registration form, complete it, and you can mail it in. Or you can go online, as I mentioned earlier, at Service Arizona. If you have an Arizona driving license or Arizona non-operating ID, you can use Service Arizona, and you can go directly to this link, and you can update your voter registration, or you can register to vote at this particular link. Okay, next slide, please. In addition to those ones I just mentioned, you can go to your county recorder's office. The Secretary of State has an excellent page that provides you direct links to your county recorder and to your election department. You can also go to the Secretary of State's website and get information on voter registration. And really what's important, when you apply for state services, such as vocational rehabilitation or long-term care, access, any state services, they're supposed to ask you about registering to vote, okay? So if you're applying for state services, that's an opportunity for you to register to vote. In addition, political parties and other organizations are out there willing to assist you to register to vote. Next slide, please. As I mentioned to you, today is National Voter Registration Day. And this is all the different events are going to be held throughout the United States. They're going to talk about voter education. They're going to talk about voter registration. If you want additional information about National Voter Registration, I have the link there for you. Please go to that link. We are going to be working with partners in Arizona later on today to do some voter registration outreach, reminding people to register their vote. So you can, at different levels, you can do all the different types of activities you want in terms of voter registration. Next slide, please. So, ways to vote. As you see on the screen, there is accessible voting equipment. And I want to remind everyone that in Arizona, our counties use different accessible voting equipment. If you want to know what equipment is being utilized in your county, you can go to the Secretary of State website, and the Secretary of State has the list of the machines that have been certified through the Secretary of State's office. You can vote in person, you can vote by drop box, or you can vote by mail. So we have many different options, and we're going to talk about those different options. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned to you earlier, voting during COVID-19 outbreak. If you're a person with a disability or have medical concerns about voting in person during the general election, you have several options to consider in casting your vote. Please check with your county election department officials regarding your options. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, counties run their elections, and so some of the resources that might be available in Maricopa County may not be the same as La Paz County, so please call your election officials. Next, please. So this is kind of a very important one. Arizona, and this is a little confusing for a lot of people. We talk about when can we assist someone with completing materials? Who can assist someone dropping off their ballot? So there's a lot of confusion. And so what I want to do briefly is just to cover this. And this is talk about Arizona ballots harvesting law. How does that impact persons with disabilities? And it says only certain people may help return a voter's ballot. Voters may rely on a caregiver, family member, household member, or election official to help mail back or otherwise return their voted ballot to the county election officials. Under the current Arizona law, other than third parties, no individuals other than the 4 categories that I mentioned, the family member, household member, election official, and caregiver can return a ballot, okay? Next slide. So that definition is pretty broad in Arizona. And so we had a meeting the other day, and that was a question we brought up to the Arizona Secretary of State. And so with the Arizona Secretary of State's guidance and from our legal staff at ACDL, the caregiver may be someone that lives in a group home staff may have the ability to drop off a ballot for a person when you look at this definition. So we want to make sure that information gets out there, that based on the interpretation of the Secretary of State and ACDL, our legal staff, that a person, it says a voter who resides in a caregiver facility may rely on the assistance of faculty caregiver, staff, or visiting family or household member, both to complete and return their ballot. Because many members with intellectual disabilities live in group homes, and they may need that particular service. We encourage everyone to vote by mail or drop their ballot off, vote independent and privately, but a member, for whatever reason, may need some assistance with someone dropping off their ballot. So we thought we'd put that information there for you. Next, please. So ways to vote: in person at non-peak hours, vote centers. These are larger places to vote. Normally, they're larger places to vote. If you're concerned with distance, in person using the accessible voting equipment, requesting an alternative ballot formats such as large print or braille ballot. If you're going to request a large print or braille ballot, please do that early enough so they can get that to you, so you can vote with that with accommodations. Okay. Please, next slide. There are ways to vote. One-time ballot request. So if you are a person that a customer goes to the polls and vote in person, but for some reason you just don't feel comfortable due to COVID-19 or whatever reasons, you can ask for a one-time ballot to be sent to you to vote in the general election. Okay. You could also get on the permanent voting list. It's called the PEVO, and that's when you receive your ballot in the mail and you vote in every qualified election. Vote by mail from the safety and the comfort of your home. In addition, curbside voting and ballot drop-off. Now, what you want to do is you want to check with your county election officials regarding the availability of curbside voting and curbside drop-off. Okay, that's administrated by each county. Now, so what happens to our military families and their families overseas, or people traveling out of the country during the election? They actually have a way for military families to participate in the election process, and those ballots went out September the 19th. Those are called UNCAVA. So if you have a family member who's out of the country or overseas, they will have an opportunity to vote in the federal general election. Next, please. Okay, important dates. If voting by mail, these are some important days. Okay, October the 7th. The ballots are going to be mailed to you, and you can start voting in person on October the 7th. Okay. On October 23rd, that's going to be the last day that you can request a ballot by mail. So if you decide to vote you're registered to vote, but you decided to, I want to vote by mail. I'm registered, but I want to change up. You have until October 23rd to request a ballot by mail. Okay. On October the 24th, Maricopa County is going to start weekend voting. So in Maricopa County, you're going to be able to start voting on the weekends on the 24th. Okay. And October the 27th, that's the last day to mail back your ballot. So if you receive your ballot in the mail and you're going to put it back in the mail, they always talk about October the 27th is the last day to mail it back. If you see there's a little asterisk right there, let's look at the next slide. Here's my recommendation. Complete your ballot and return it immediately or as soon as possible. We've heard a lot of conversation about the mail being slow. You're concerned with the mail. If you get your ballot, don't wait for your ballot. Don't sit around with your ballot. Fill it in, just return it immediately. And if you're concerned with your ballot not getting back, especially if it's after the 27th, you should be able to drop it off at a curbside or polling site in your county. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Don't let your mail stop your vote. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the Special Election Board. The Special Election Board, voting at home or at work by using the Special Election Board, individuals from 2 different political parties will come to you to assist you in casting your vote. You need to contact your county recorder's office or county election department for more information, eligibility, and availability of services through the Special Election Board. Each county may operate their own Special Election Board to assist you in voting. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. And the Special Election Board talks about if you're a person with a disability or you have an illness and you're unable to vote or you do not want to do mail-in vote. Next slide, please. So here are some of those accommodations that the Maricopa County Recorder's Office is going to be doing during the general election. In response to the COVID-19, they've expanded their services. So they're going to still do some in-person Special Election Board, but they have special protocols to follow. regarding, personal protection, making sure you're safe, making sure the poll workers are safe, okay? Also, Maricopa County is looking to do FaceTime voting, voting on your phone, voting with a tablet. They have a process, a procedures for that. You can contact the Maricopa County and ask more detail about this process. And they're also going to use couriers for voting, okay? These are some of the things that Maricopa County is going to be doing. They may be different in La Paz, they may be different in Pima County. So please contact your county election officials to find out what are the available services through the special election board, okay? Next slide, please. Okay, on voting day, okay? Number one, it's very important, especially during COVID-19, many of the polling places have changed. So if you're customary going to the same building for the last 5, 10 years, you need to check because those building owners may not want the county in there anymore. So the county may have found different locations. So you need to check with your county election officials or the Secretary of State. And remember this, as I said to you earlier, counties run their elections. In Maricopa County, we have a lot of vote centers in our county for the general election. In Pima County, they have limited vote centers, but they're still precinct-based, okay, for those living in Pima County. So keep that in mind. So what do I take with me on election day? Well, if you don't know, Arizona requires you to have ID. What kind of ID? Arizona driving license, state issued ID. And if you don't have those two, you can go to the website and they will list a combination of IDs that are available. If you don't have a picture ID, and they talk about a whole list of IDs that will allow you to vote in the state of Arizona. Next slide, please. Okay, so on election day, if you go to the polls and you're there voting in person and you're having some problems for the voting machine's not on, a rude poll worker, inaccessible way for you to get in and to vote, each polling location will have an election official, okay, there to help you resolve any voting problem. These election officials are called inspectors, judge, or marshals, okay? So at every one of your polling locations, there's gonna be someone, and different counties have different names for them, but they're gonna be called a judge, they're called inspector, or marshal, and they have certain duties to ensure keeping the peace, making sure things are running smoothly, and to address any of your concerns, including wait times. If there's any wait times, the marshal, inspectors, or judge are supposed to assist you with resolving those particular issues. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, so, no, go back. Go back. Okay, thank you. Voting problems. So on election day, the Arizona Center for Disability Law, we have a voter hotline that we maintain. We start at 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock on election day. We're there to address any voting issues that you may have as a person with a disability. Our goal is to assist you to resolve your issues so you can vote that day. We can work with all election officials to try to make sure that you have a right to cast a private and independent vote. And you can give us a call. We will assist you. And if you are discriminated against, we have the ability to file a HAVA complaint on your behalf to address your concerns with election officials. Okay, next slide, please. So here's the information of the Arizona Center for Disability Law. This is our phone number, this is our email, and this is our website. So if you have any questions about voting, I'm here to take your calls. It doesn't have to be on election day. If you have any questions between here and election about voting, feel free to give me a call. Give us a call, and we'll try to answer any questions that you may have regarding voting. And that is the end of my presentation. If there's any particular questions, I will take those questions and answer those questions to the best of my ability.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to remind folks that if they did want to ask a question verbally, they should use the raise hand function. You access that by clicking the participants tab, and at the bottom of the participants list, there should be a little raise hand icon. I see some questions coming in. If you're on the phone, dialing *9 will raise your hand from the phone. And if you do that, we'll be sure to call on you and unmute you so you can share. So I see someone with their hand raised, Kathy. Kathy, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello, Kathy.
Should have prompted you with a little button there, Kathy. I'll try one more time.
I don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Kathy, I hear you.
Oh, okay, good. There we go. Kathy Ritchie with KJZZ News. Thank you for hosting this. I was wondering if you could provide some examples of some hurdles that individuals have run into. It's something I kind of want to try and illustrate and just a story that I'm doing today. What are some of the challenges both for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as individuals who have physical disabilities, and how is that being addressed? I know that we talked about training. I think Ronaldo had mentioned the training with the poll workers, but is the training different now than it was in previous years? So some examples of hurdles individuals have run into and remedies that we might see this year. Thank you.
Well, Kathy, one of the things about it is, each county does a poll worker training. And so it's just a matter of trying to reach out to the different counties and doing poll worker training. And also in looking at their curriculum, improving their curriculum in terms of poll worker training, adding disability etiquette. We've done some poll worker training. We did a training with the self-advocates, myself in Mojave County was responsive to that. And so, and one of the challenges is that poll workers come at different elections. So it's constantly be training poll workers about disability etiquette, about meeting the needs of voters with disabilities. So it's ongoing training that will always be needed in terms of it. Some of the challenges that we've faced in the past is around the accessible voting machine, making sure the poll workers really understand how to use that accessible voting machine, making sure that equipment has been set up. So it's a statewide issue in terms of making sure all these pieces come together. One of the things that we've done a lot with Maricopa County Recorder Fontes is meeting with him with the disability advocates and ongoing addressing issues about signing materials when you're not able to sign that material. And so those are some of the things that we work with the recorder and our election officials. One of the things we worked a lot this year is trying to make sure that voters with disabilities have access to voting options to address COVID-19. Not going to polls, allow them to vote video-wise, not reducing curbside voting. So what we're trying to do is make sure that they keep tools in the toolbox, training their staffs. So when you take away, curbside voting, that's a major impact with people with medical needs or people with disabilities. So it's ongoing working with our election officials to educate them about the needs of voters with disabilities, and it will continue to be something that we need to work on probably each election cycles, because there's so many changes that happens between elections.
Thank you. And do you mind citing just a couple examples that you've heard of what people are running into? And then I also just wanted to ask Arden, if she's still on the call, she had mentioned that there are people who who had, my notes aren't in front of me now, that there were individuals who didn't think folks with IDD should vote at all, which was that was surprising.
No.
I mean, I guess, yeah, okay. No, elaborate.
Yeah, we see Arden can address that. We see that too at ACDL, that people, have this, they may not say it outward to you, but they kind of say, well, that person has intellectual disabilities, and they question their ability to make decisions. And so, but we as a PNA, that persons with disabilities, have a right to fully participate in this process like any other citizen. And so, and some of the specific things that in the past that voters with disabilities have faced is there was a survey done by SAVE, parking lots, making sure that you have signage, making sure that the parking is available for people with disability. If you have curbside, making sure you have an efficient curbside process where a person with a disability can vote. And also things around the accessible voting equipment has always been a challenging issue for voters with disabilities, making sure that staff knows how to use that equipment and that equipment is on. And so that's a constant reminder that we talk with election officials, and also understanding, people first language, and how do you refer to a person with a disability, and disability etiquette. So we work extensively with election officials throughout the state on some of these particular issues. Any more questions?
Looks like Arden is about to respond. She's calling in again.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to echo what Ronaldo said, that we heard a lot of those same things. We heard some about the voting machines. We definitely heard people coming to polling places and the voting machines having not been turned on or tested, or having the previous election's ballots was one story we heard. But we did hear people say, I think just because we asked a more direct question about this, but we did hear people say that they just didn't think that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the board had the capacity to vote. We did hear some of that. It wasn't everyone. I want to be specific about that. It was sort of a subset of the people that we talked to, but we definitely heard that in a little bit more direct language than I think we would normally. So yeah, so that's still a really big thing that exists out there.
Okay. And one more thing that during the last election, the primary election, Recorder Fontes did make a note that there's a significant increased number of voters requesting Braille and large print, significant improvement. And so I think those numbers represent the work with the disability advocates and the Recorder's Office in increasing those numbers of individuals requesting Braille and large print ballots. So I think we are seeing some headway, but we still have a long ways to go in terms of meeting the needs of voters with disabilities.
Just wanted to jump in and share some kind of comments and update on what's been going on in the chat. So we definitely had some folks talk about the issue that Ronaldo brought up about disabled parking spaces for persons with disabilities and kind of access along that. I also want to honor, Jim asked some questions about voting in tribal lands, and shared some interesting initiatives going on in South Dakota from their USED, and asking if people know about voting in tribal areas in Arizona. Are there initiatives about that, specifically with persons with disabilities? So kind of put that out there to our group. And then also some questions from a while ago about asking if anyone had any resources for initiatives related to persons with disabilities, or things that are very particular, on the kind of what to vote for side of things. So if anyone, our presenters, have thoughts on that, or if people want to share in the chat, all that would be welcome.
Okay, so let me address a little bit about the nations in Arizona. I was on a web earlier today, and there are individuals who are working to address the needs of Native voters in Arizona, in terms of the tribal access to making sure that, voter registration, extending voter registration time. So there's a lot of activity going on, increasing drop boxes. And so there's some litigation going on right now. There's some negotiation discussion with the Secretary of State to address the needs of voters with disabilities. So they are doing that. About a year ago, we went up on the Navajo Hopi nations with a group to look at some of the voting issues there. So they are actively working in the state of Arizona to address the needs of the Native American nations, and also the needs of rural voters in Arizona.
Okay, I see a hand raised from Brandy. Brandy, I'm going to prompt you to unmute yourself now.
Hi, I'm calling because I work in an employment services a nonprofit here in Tucson, and one of the things that we talk about is in our self-advocacy is voting. And a question I had is related to guardianship and how to find out a little bit more information on how to guide some of our students who have guardianship over them, and what does limited guardianship mean when it comes to voting. And I understand that there's the piece where you have to petition, but if someone has like full guardianship over somebody, that means they are not allowed to vote. And then what would be some instances of limited guardianship where they could vote potentially if they're petitioned?
Let me say this. I'm not an attorney, so I really can't answer those particular questions. So I would ask you maybe to follow up with our office, and maybe we can provide that information for you. We do have some general information on our website. If you haven't had a chance to go there, take a look at that information and feel free to follow up with us, and maybe we can get you that information.
Okay, yeah, because we're just trying to figure out how to go about it, because we have students members in our groups that don't have guardianship and some that do, and so we want to make sure we're giving general voting information so that we're talking about the important information.
And we do have a document. We do have a document on our website that you can go to that has some additional information in it that might be able to answer those particular questions for you. But as I said, feel free to follow up with me, and I just really am not in the capacity to answer those questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So as a reminder, if you have a question, to raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hands. Or if you share it in the chat, we'll make sure it gets read out loud.
That brings up a really interesting point. Has anyone on the call, either professionally or individually, been involved with going to court and helping someone, or doing it for yourself, change your legal options so someone with a disability can vote? Either changing your status from a full to a limited guardianship, or doing that actual process. Has anyone actually been involved with something like that on the call? One thing that our research has revealed is that while Arizona law does allow this practice, we just don't have a lot of real life cases to explore and learn from. So if you know of anybody, please have them contact us here at the council, because we are really interested in those stories. I'll put my email in the chat box if you'd like to contact us.
So also, Sarah, is that we have a really active group of disability advocates that I spoke to you about. We've worked together for almost 4 years now and making some significant headway. If you're interested and want to participate with us, please get in contact with me, and so we can invite you to participate. Our goal is to make sure that the electoral process is fully accessible for persons with disabilities. We meet with the recorders, our different election officials. So we have different projects that we work on. So if you're interested in participating and joining our group to really improve access to voting for persons with disabilities, feel free to email me and I will get you in the loop when we have different events. Like today, we're going to be trying to coordinate a little bit of National Voter Registration Day activities, things of that nature. But one of the things I really want to say, after October the 5th, when elections over with, we're going to do full court press, get out the vote activities, either through vote by mail, vote in person, but we're going to do everything we can to promote persons with disabilities getting to the polls. So it's going to be our big get out the vote after October 6th. So if you want to join us for that, we would love for you to be there with us. And we're just going to do everything we can to work with families, providers, persons with disabilities, and make sure they have an opportunity to get to the polls in whatever manner that's safe for them so they can cast their vote. Any more questions? If not, I thank you for your patience, and I hope you're able to get out and register the vote, and please share with your family members.
Thank you so much, Ronaldo. I have one more question for you. Can you talk a little bit about transportation to the polls by staffers who may work at a group home?
Well, one of the things about when a person lives in a group home, they live in that home, they go to the store, they go to the doctors, and if a person needs a ride to vote, then they need to make sure that person gets transportation to the polls. I mean, that's just a basic rights that a member has, is to vote, and if they vote in person, then they should be able to get a ride to the polls, cast their vote. And also, if that person needs assistance from a group home staff with their paperwork, they can ask that person. It's that person's choice, okay? It's that person's choice who they ask to assist them, either someone with them or to assist them, as we talked earlier about their ability maybe to drop off their ballot. So that's something new. And if a person is challenged, that's something we want to know at ACDL, because we want to make sure that all members have access to the electoral process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking about that. If anybody still has questions, feel free to reach out to Ronaldo. He shared his information there at the Center for Disability Law. And we're just really grateful that our speakers have been able to join us today. We know that we are in the home stretch when it comes to both voter registration and actually assisting individuals with casting their ballot. So full court press, right? As we head into November 3, like you said. Ronaldo, thank you so much for sharing your information today. Thank you to each of you for joining us. We know you have a big role in helping get out the vote and ensuring voter access for everybody this election season. So we are grateful for your time. We hope to do more of these ADDN calls in the future. So tell us what you'd like us to cover, because we want to make sure we are providing information that you need and that you want. Thank you to all our staff who helped make this happen today. And we just hope you have a great rest of your day. Have a great National Voter Registration Day, and we will see you next time.